choppy ba akong tingog or klaro ra kayo? Or blur ba akong background like the last time? Feedback daw guys. Okay lang. Okay ka na, makita ko ang background, law of supply. Alright, clear man no? Okay, so now again we will be talking about the law of supply. So in economics, when we say supply, it pertains to a firm's willingness and ability to produce and distribute goods and services to the consumer at a given time. So same concept sa demand, ang willingness and ability. Okay, so the firm should be willing. Willing meaning since firms, they are profit maximizers. So they are only willing to produce goods and services if they can benefit from it. And how can they benefit? Through revenue and profit. So pag walay revenue or profit, the behavior of the firm is they will not produce any goods or services. So as long as it is profitable, then the firm will produce. So when we say quantity supplied, so that's the amount of a particular product that firms would be willing and able to offer. So the difference lang is, ang sa supply, it's general, quantity supplied, it's the amount, the exact amount. So in other words, supply is the relationship between price and quantity supplied. So we can present supply in three different forms. Same sa demand. We have the schedule, the curve, and the function. So when we say supply schedule, it's just a table of values that shows the different level of prices and the different level of quantity supplied. And sa curve, it's a graph illustrating the relationship of price and quantity supplied. So if you have noticed, as the price increases, the quantity supplied also increases. So it means that if the price of a certain good will increase, then the firms will produce more of that certain goods or services. Okay, so that's the behavior of the firm. Why? Again, because they are expecting that they can benefit from it due to the revenue and profit. Okay, so how can we get the revenue? So revenue is price times quantity. So if you notice, as the price increases, the quantity supplied will also increase. So the revenue will also increase. Okay, so the more revenue, the more profit, then the firms will supply more goods and services. So their relationship, as shown here on the graph, it is positive. It's upward sloping. Unlike sa demand, it's downward sloping. So sa law of demand, if the price will increase, the quantity demanded decreases. Sa law of supply, if the price will increase, the quantity supplied increases. So again, it's called law because that's the expected behavior of the firms if faced with different level of prices. So an increase in market price will lead to an increase in quantity supplied. Ergo, a decrease in market price will lead to a decrease in quantity supplied, ceteris paribus. leave other things constant since there are many factors that can also affect supply aside from the price. Alright. Now we can also represent supply in a mathematical function. So the supply function shows the relationship between quantity supplied na, and the price of the product. And it can be written as QS is equals to C plus DP, where QS is equals to quantity supplied, P is the price, C are the factors affecting supply other than the price, or also the value of QS if the price is 0. And then D there is the slope, which is a change in QS. You have QS over QP. Oh, by the way, katong sa demand ng PowerPoint akong gipasa, it is change in P over change in QD. So bali siya dapat change in QD over change in P. Na mali lang na ako to og type. So this is the correct one. So quantity demand. Delta QD over delta P. Ang sa supply kay delta QS over delta P. So ako nang explain how why the formula is like that. Let me share my whiteboard. Ayun. Klaro ba ang whiteboard? Okay. Feedback mo guys ha pag ma-blur or dili maklaro kaya para maka-adjust ko. Okay, so if you can still remember your math, kaning equation of the line, the formula for that or the function for that is y is equals to mx plus b. Right, where y is located sa vertical na line, and then imong x is nasa horizontal, and where your m is the slope, and then b is the y-intercept. So again, ang y nasa vertical, ang x nasa horizontal, then b is the y-intercept, and then m is ang slope. So sa ato ang supply function, QS is equals to C plus D. Oops, wait. Then atong supply curve. P. Okay, so what have you noticed? Compare natin ang equation of the line at ato ang supply curve or supply function. So ang equation of the line, oops. Okay. So the y here, it represents kaning P since pareha sila nasa vertical. Kaning x is the QS or the Q, and then your B is kaning C, the intercept, and then your slope is D. So our supply function is the inverse of the equation of the line function. Y is equals mx plus b. Right? But if we follow, i-rewrite natin ni ato ang supply function in terms of p. So it can be written as P is equals to C plus DQ. Now this here, when supply function in terms of P, we call it the inverse. Kaya ano kung palit o pentab, ano ba? This is now the inverse supply function. Kasama in terms of P na siya. Now, the formula for the slope in the equation of the line, but to get the slope of this one, kaning y and x equation of the line, the formula for that is change in y over change in x. This is equals to your m. But since ang ato ang supply function is the inverse of the equation of the line, now the slope of our supply function, which is the d, is equals to change in q over change in p. So mo nito d. But if we will use our supply function in terms of p, kanang inverse supply function, the formula for our slope here is change in p over change in q. Oops. There. So you see the difference? If we follow the original supply function here, the formula of the slope is change in q over change in p, which is we also called the inverse of the slope if we refer to the equation of the line. Okay, kung kani siya, kaning change in q over change in p is also equal to 1 over delta p over delta q, or kani. Okay, clear? Na gets inyo ano yung nga ang slope? Question. May question? Nakasabay pa? Wala na may question? Okay, I think there's no questions here, so let's continue. Alright, so there are several factors that can affect our supply. So we have our first three. We have technology, change in input prices, government policies, specifically tax and subsidies. Ito na isa-isa na on how they can affect the supply curve. So number one, technology. So it's already given that if the firm will use a newer technology, then it is expected that newer technology are more efficient compared to older ones. Let's see. So let's say this is our supply. Okay, so let's say this is our supply function. Now, if the firm will acquire newer technology, since again newer technology are more efficient compared to older ones, then it's expected that the supply for a certain good or services will increase and it will shift our supply curve outward. Okay, again, if there's an acquired newer technology in the production, our supply curve will shift outward. So there's an increase in supply. But if the firm will choose to use older technology, then it is expected that the supply will decrease and shift inward. So that's the effect of technology in the production. Okay, next, change in input prices. So what are those inputs? So if you can still remember our factors of production, our inputs are land, labor, and capital. So if there's any changes in the price in any of those inputs, then it will affect now the supply. So if there's an increase in input prices, so let's say you have rice farm and then there's an increase in the price of fertilizer. So since fertilizer is a basic need in rice farming, so pag mag-increase ang price of fertilizer, it is expected that the supply for rice will shift inward. So there's a decrease in supply if there's an increase in the input prices. So if there's a decrease in the input prices, then our supply for certain good will increase and then our supply curve will shift outward. Okay, next. In government policies, we have two types of government policies. There's actually a lot, but mano siya ang common policies that can affect our supply. The taxes and the subsidies. So a tax on a particular good will decrease that good supply in the market. And then subsidies, these are the payment from the government to producers for each unit they produce. So this is like a help of the government to the firms getting subsidies. So let's say taxes, if there's an increase in tax for a certain good, let's say a sales tax, an increase in tax will lead to a decrease in supply. So kaning blue. So the supply curve will shift inward. There's a decrease in supply, but if the tax will decrease, then our supply will shift outward. There's an increase. Why? Because the taxes, that instead of paying that money to the government as a form of tax, then that money can be used in the production of goods and services. Okay, because tax is considered as a cost. Now, subsidies, for example, like what happened sa tong country recently, katong bagyo. So, especially sa mga farmers that has been affected katong na-flooded ilang farms. So, normally, the government will help them through subsidizing their production, either through giving them free seedlings, free fertilizers, or any other stuff, or money. So, if there's a subsidy, then the supplier will be encouraged to produce more of that certain good. So subsidies, the effect for that is an increase in supply. So it will shift outward. Okay. So other factors we have the price ni siya, price of related products. Again, this is still demand. Gawing edit. Ano demand? This is supply. Saan na to? So another factors that can affect supply is the price of related product. Now this is different from the price of related products sa demand ha. This is not about substitute or complementary. So when we say price of related products in supply side, it means that related products that the producer or the firm can produce using almost the same inputs. So let's say, so rice farming. So naay 1 hectare na land of farmer. And then that 1 hectare, the farmer can either plant rice or corn. Okay, almost same naman na sila og inputs ang rice or corn. The difference lang is kaning seedling. Okay, now for example, the price of corn will increase, then the supplier or the farmer will then think of more to produce more of corn instead of rice, since producing more corn will give them more profit and revenue. So ang mahitabo sa supply sa rice, it will decrease. So let's say we have here the supply curve of rice, and then if there's an increase in the price of the corn, since farmers can substitute rice to corn, so kung ma-shift sila sa corn, the supply of rice will decrease. But if the price of corn will decrease, then the supply of rice will increase. So that's how price of related product can affect the supply. And then last one, kanang special influences, there's actually a lot. Ako na silang gisa. So we have expectations about future prices. So if a certain commodity, like the forecast na to that the price for that commodity will increase in the next 3 months, then as a supplier, I will produce more of that commodity and then sell them after 3 months, because it will give me more revenue and profit. So ang supply niya will automatically increase. So weather can also affect supply. Again, kaya mga natural calamities. Like again, what happened recently tungkol sa bagyo, nakan mga rice farms ang nangadaot. So it is expected that the supply for rice will decrease for certain months. Then innovations, if there are like changes in the products or in the inputs, can also affect the supply, since innovations, same as technology, if we acquire recent or newer innovations, then it is more efficient compared to the old process. Market structure can also affect supply, like monopoly, oligopoly, because they can dictate on how much to produce. And then size of the market. Now, size of the market pertains to the number of firms for that specific good. Let's say karang mamaligyaay maruya diya sa kanto, pag daghan na sila o mamaligyaay, meaning daghan na po supply yung maruya. So that can also affect our supply curve. Question about the factors? Wala, no? Very easy to understand. Okay, this one. Shift in supply versus movement along the curve. So again, please don't be confused with the definition. So when we say a shift, so a shift in supply curve, or a shift in supply, it means that a movement, or a shift in supply, it means that a movement of the curve itself. It's either it will shift outward or it will shift inward. So may mga factors that can shift our supply curve. Kato ang mga gimension ganiha, like input prices, price-related products, technology, government policies, kato ang mga special influences. And when we say a change in quantity supplied, This is just a movement along the curve, and it is determined depending on the change in price. So let's say if the price is A, then the quantity supplied is B. But if the price will increase to C, then the quantity supplied will increase to D. So the movement along the curve is the change in quantity supplied. So please don't be confused, a change in supply and the change in quantity supply. Alright, so if you sum up all the individual firms' supply, then that's your market supply. So for example, it's a graph. So if you add up firm A, B, and C supply, then that would be the supply for the entire market. So isum up lang nimo sila. Like sa A, 30,000, B, 10,000, C, 25,000, so on and so forth. Alright, so that's it for law of supply. I have a sample problem here. So gikan na siya sa module or learning guide 2.1, navigate. So you don't have to answer it, ako na lang i-present here. So let's say we have our supply schedule. Now, given that supply schedule, we have to answer the following. Number 1, construct the supply curve using the data in the table. Number 2, derive the supply function. And then number 3, why is the supply curve upward sloping? So explain in 3 to 5 sentences the behavior. Okay, so how to do it? Going back to my whiteboard. Ito. Okay, so let's say we have this supply schedule here. Now to plot our supply curve, just always remember in creating the graph, ang period is always at the vertical and then Q is at the horizontal. Right, so and then our supply curve is always upward sloping, represents the positive relationship of price and quantity supplied. So as the price increases, quantity supplied will also increase. Okay, so that's how you graph your supply schedule. Again, it's upward sloping. So question number 2, derive your supply function. So how can we derive a supply function given that schedule? So going back. So remember, ang atong supply function is QS equals to C plus DP. Where again, QS is our quantity supplied, P is the price. C here is our QS intercept, meaning if price is 0, our QS is C. And then our D is the slope. Now first, let's determine the slope. So the formula for our slope here, which is D, is equals to change in Q over change in P. So first, let's identify 2 points sa tong schedule. So let's say kaning 80 and 2, 160 and 6. So let's just find the difference since atong ginapangita isang delta or ang change. So from point number 2 to point number 6, so what's the difference? Minus lang, 6 minus 2. So the change is 4 for quantity supplied. And then 80 to 60, so there's an increase of 80. Oops. So 4, the change in Q, then the change in P is 80. So i-divide lang natin sila. So 4 divided by 80, ilan man? 4 divided by 80. Okay, so 4 divided by 80 is 0.05. So this is now our slope, 0.05, our D. Okay, now let's find our C. So remember again, our C is our Q-intercept. It's the value of Q if P is equals to 0. So if price is 0, given naman, so our C now is negative 2. So our supply equation now is QS is equals to negative 2 plus 0.05 P. Okay, so that's your supply function given that supply schedule. Okay, and then now explain why the supply curve is upward sloping and what are the behavior of the firm. So supply curve is upward sloping since there's a obviously positive relationship between price and quantity. So as the price increases, producer tends to produce more goods and services due to saman. Remember that producers are profit maximizers. So due to higher profit. So try niyong point out. And then producer would produce less if the price decrease since wala sila yung makuha na profit or lower ilang profit makuha. So that's the answer for navigate 2.1. Question. That's the end of my slide.